Hello, everyone. Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. It's now the 18th of January, 2023. Click on the subscribe button below here to subscribe to my future episodes, and then also the notification bell in the far upper right to be notified when the episodes are released. Okay, the topic today is keeping Arlington's Confederate memorial intact. Arlington Cemetery's Confederate memorial should remain intact. Although 4 of the first 7 cotton states arguably seceded over slavery, they did not cause the Civil War. They had no purpose to overthrow the federal government. After forming the 7-state Confederacy in February 1861, they promptly sent commissioners to Washington to, quote, preserve the most friendly relations, close quote, with the truncated Union. Instead of letting the cotton states depart in peace, the North's resolve to force them back into the Union caused the war. With half of the military-aged white men of the eventual 11-state Confederacy, the 4 states of Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas only joined the original 7 after President Lincoln called upon them to provide volunteers to force the original 7 back into the Union. In response to a telegram from Lincoln's Secretary of War directing that Virginia provide her quota of such volunteers, Governor John Lecter replied that his state would not comply and concluded, quote, "You have chosen to inaugurate civil war," close quote. On the eve of the war, Northerners and Southerners differed on their relative loyalties to the federal and state governments. According to historians Edward Channing and Eva Moore, Northerners had, quote, the general opinion that the Union was sovereign and the states were part of it. The idea that the people of the United States formed one nation had been reinforced by the coming of immigrants from abroad. These people had no conception of a state as a sentimental attachment to a state. They had come to America to better their condition, close quote. By mostly settling in the North, they influenced most Northerners to believe that they owed their loyalty to the Union first and only secondarily to their state. In contrast, among Southerners, quote, every white boy and girl grew up to regard himself or herself as born into the service of his or her state, close quote. After the 1892 dedication of the monument to the Confederate dead in Knoxville, one speaker echoed the point, quote, the Southern soldier believed his allegiance was due first to his state and then to the general government. So when his state called for his service, he responded, believing it to be his duty, close quote. Moreover, when some of America's founding fathers in the North were still living, the region had a much greater attachment to states' rights. During the War of 1812, the governors of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island would only deploy militia to defend their respective states, despite directives from President James Madison that they be put into the national service. In 1814, during that war, New Englanders held a convention in Hartford to suggest amendments to the U.S. Constitution that would strengthen states' rights generally, as well as the region's influence nationally. Ironically, by advancing the calendar 47 years from that 1814 convention, the following Hartford resolution from that convention might well have been written by a seceding Southern state 47 years later. And here is the resolution. Quote, in cases of deliberate, dangerous, and palpable infractions of the Constitution affecting the sovereignty of the state, it is not only the right but the duty of that state to interpose its authority for their protection, close quote. Those are New England Yankees that made that resolution. Thus, both Northerners and Southerners valued states' rights as a fundamental American right when it served their purposes. Similarly, both Union and Confederate soldiers were Americans. Both merit a memorial to the reconciliation. According to historian David Blight, by 1874, just 9 years after Appomattox, quote, a genuine reconciliation based upon mutual experience was already taking hold among soldiers, close quote. That's David Blight, one of the academic historians that most disdains the South. 2 years earlier, Congress and President U.S. Grant had authorized Confederates disenfranchised by the 1868 14th Amendment to become candidates once again for the House and Senate seats if they desired. So you see what's happening is 1872, just 7 years after Appomattox, Congress and the president said, okay, let's let these Southerners run for office again if they want to. After Southerners eagerly volunteered to fight in the 1898 Spanish-American War, President William McKinley, a veteran of the Union during the Civil War, McKinley opined that America should honor the dead of both North and South. In 1906, President William Taft authorized the United Daughters of the Confederacy to raise funds for a reconciliation memorial at Arlington. The resulting sculpture, created by Virginia Military Institute graduate and Confederate veteran Moses Ezekiel, was erected in 1914. Notwithstanding their homeland had been devastated by the Civil War, postbellum Confederates and their descendants more readily volunteered to fight under the old flag than did citizens from other parts of the country. Presently, 44% of military volunteers are from the South, although the region has about 36% of the 18 to 24 age group population, which is the age group that provides enlistees. This disproportional service is a long tradition. In a 1955 Georgia Review article about postbellum Southern volunteerism, James Bonner wrote, quote, it would be impossible, of course, for the scholar to prove that the Southerner in battle has possessed more courage or displayed better fighting qualities than his compatriot from any other part of the country. However, from the statistical viewpoint, there is irrefutable evidence of the fact that throughout American history, no other section of the country has sent its picket youth into battle so freely and so heedlessly as has the South, close quote. In World War II, Texas A&M's military college provided more officers than did Annapolis and West Point combined. Bonner also wrote, quote, at the outbreak of World War II, the southern states had the highest proportion of volunteer enlistments to induction under the Selective Service Act of any other group of states, close quote. Nationally, the number of enlistees was half of the number of draftees. Quote, in contrast, Georgians volunteered at a rate of 93% of those drafted, while the figure for Texas was 99% and for Kentucky 123%. So great was the volunteer enlistment from the South that Congressman Luther Patrick of Alabama stated that it was necessary to start selective service in order to geographically equalize the manpower burden for national defense. If it hadn't been for selective service, the South might have been the principal source of soldiers that won World War II. Without knowledge of the approaching Spanish-American War, the dedication speaker at Knoxville's 1892 Confederate Monument noted earlier accurately predicted, quote, I am persuaded that the soldier from Mississippi or Louisiana would give his life in defense of his country today as readily as one from Massachusetts or Maine, close quote. He said that back in 1892. Since the authentic combatants of the Civil War speedily and genuinely reconciled, it is a shame, it is quite shameful to overrule them a century later. As essayist Rick Sapp notes, an analysis of the arguments for removal compared to those for retention shows that Arlington's Confederate memorial should remain intact. The destruction case is succinctly put by the Defense Department's renaming commission. Quote, the memorial offers a nostalgic, mythologized vision of the Confederacy, including highly sanitized depictions of slavery, close quote. To that is often added claims of Southern treason and the presumption that the Confederate soldier chiefly went to battle to defend slavery and not his homeland, as is well documented. All are opinions. All of those reasons for tearing down the monument are opinions. In contrast, in the case for preservation of that memorial hinges upon the substantial evidence from the late 19th and early 20th centuries when America's leaders and citizens, including still living veterans on both sides, generally wanted reconciliation. So to destroy the monument is to erase the history of that reconciliation, and to signal that there can be no end to the Civil War. And I thank you, President or Senator Elizabeth Warren, for dumping us into this dilemma. Now, hopefully it's not a dilemma. The solution is to honor that memorial. Okay. It's time to, what's happening in our politics today is what's causing this change of attitude towards the Confederate memorials. And it's coming from identity politics, and we've got to get control of those who are promoting identity politics and refute them. Do that with my book, The Deadly Frauds, Critical Race Theory and Identity Politics. You can get it from Amazon and fine bookstores. I think it's $20 or something like that. I'll sell it to you. Well, actually, I think it's just $18 or $16. I'll sell it to you for, you can buy it online, I think, for about $18. I'll sell it to you with an autograph for $22. Just email me, Phil, PHIL_Lee, LEIGH. I think you can see I feel pretty strongly about this particular episode. And I want to thank you for watching. Good job.